Well, hello, everybody. I'm David Fullen, the pastor of the Yeargins Chapel, United Methodist Church, and Drakesboro, United Methodist Church. And it's my pleasure to present to you really the first chapter of our new pursuit to share the gospel of Christ as people are ready and to engage them in conversations that would be helpful to them. And we are interested in learning a little bit about how to ask questions. And our author, Gregory Kukl, has a lot to share with us concerning how to do these things. The book is called Tactics. It was published in we're using the 10th anniversary edition to read and to teach from. But I'm finding the original copyright dates. The first one is 2009 and the second 2019 by Gregory Kukl. And so let's take a look at his first chapter. In the book is written in two main parts. The first is the game plan, and the second part is finding the flaws. So let's take a look at part one, the game plan, and chapter one, diplomacy or D-Day, question mark. Which will it be? Apologetics. This is the area that we are talking about now, and one in which there is lots of information for us to know. And I guess we probably can't learn everything there is to learn. But it all centers around giving reasons or evidence to support Christianity. And apologetics, some believers really, really enjoy that because they enjoy arguing with others to the place where there's a clear winner and a loser, and they love to win. And other Christians shy away from it because of the controversies that apologetics produces. By definition, apologists defend the faith, and it is part of our discipleship to learn to do this. Apologists defeat false ideas. They explain or destroy. They take care of speculations raised up against the knowledge of God. And so they are listening and discerning. Defenders don't dialogue, they fight. So it's much better to be found among the apologists than among the defenders of the faith. Jesus said that when you find yourself as a sheep amid wolves, be innocent but shrewd. Another one of those difficult passages to discern. It's Matthew 10, verse 16. Even though there is real warfare going on, I think our engagements should look more like diplomacy than D-Day. It's important always has been important to me that whatever we are discussing, we preserve the relationship so that there's a person who we can go back to later and check on and speak again with, not someone who we've offended, who will see us walking down one side of the street and they'll go all the way over to the other side of the street to avoid us. So Greg offers to teach us through this writing a way for us to be diplomatic, able to navigate smoothly and graciously through hazardous encounters. And he wants to suggest a method that he calls the ambassador model. So it's his ambassador model that we will follow. And he will teach us that model little by little until we move into part 2 of the book. If you're like me, you would like to make a difference for the kingdom and in the kingdom of God, but you're not sure how to begin. And so he has a strategy that he's interested in teaching us. It's a strategy that enables us to get involved in a way that we never thought we could be involved with apologetics, and yet we will maintain a margin of safety for ourselves and for those with whom we speak. He says, I'm going to teach you how to navigate in conversations so that you stay in control in a good way, even though your knowledge is limited. And I think for us to be able to acknowledge those limitations is a healthy thing. I'm going to introduce you to a handful of effective maneuvers. I call them tactics, and that will keep you in the driver's seat. So let's take a look at the first, what shall we call it? The first vignette or the first case. Since I've dealt in the psychological literature, I tend to think of case studies. But here's a study or an example that he lists at the very beginning. And I'll try to give you those details. He was on vacation with his family at a retreat in northern Wisconsin. And he and his wife stopped in a store in town to get some photos digitized. And he noticed that the woman who was helping them had a large pentagram, a 5-pointed star, often associated with the occult, dangling from her neck. So he asked, does that star have religious significance? And he pointed to the pendant. And then the second part of his question, or is it just jewelry? Yes, it has religious significance, she answered. The 5 points stand for earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. Then she added, I'm a pagan. My wife, he says, was caught off guard by the woman's candor, couldn't suppress a laugh, and then quickly apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. It's just that I've never heard anyone actually admit right out that they're pagan. And she explained, the lady accepted her apology and associated the term pagan only in the negative way. Her friends yell at their kids and tell them, get in here, you bunch of pagans. So that's the association. And then Greg comes back and he says, so you're Wiccan. He continued. She nodded, yes, she was a witch. It's an earth religion the woman explained. Like the Native Americans, we respect all life. If you respect all life, then I suppose you're pro-life on the abortion issue. She shook her head. No, actually, I'm not. I'm pro-choice. I was surprised. Isn't that an unusual position for someone in Wicca to take? I mean, since you're committed to respecting all life. You're right, it's odd, she admitted. Then she qualified herself. I know I could never do that, she said, referring to abortion. I could never kill a baby. I wouldn't do anything to hurt someone else because it might come back on me. Now, this was a remarkable turn in the conversation for two reasons, he says. First, notice the words she used to describe abortion. By her own admission, abortion was baby killing. The phrase wasn't a rhetorical flourish of mine. This was her own description. I did not have to persuade her that abortion takes the life of an innocent human being. She already knew it. What she didn't realize, though, was that her candid admission had given me a leg up in the discussion, and I was not going to waste that opportunity. For the rest of the conversation, I abandoned the word abortion. It would be baby killing instead. He wanted to use her phrase. And so the suggestion under that first bit of dialogue, beware when rhetoric becomes a substitute for substance. You always know that a person has a weak position when he tries to accomplish with the clever use of words what argument alone cannot do. Second, we're back to Greg's analysis now. He thought it was surprising that her first reason for not hurting a defenseless child was self-interest. Something bad might come back on her. Is that the best she can do? Greg thought. The comment was worth pursuing, but he ignored it and took a different track from there. Well, maybe you wouldn't do anything to hurt a baby, but other people would, I countered calmly. Shouldn't we do something to stop them from killing babies? And then she said, I think women should have a choice. She responded quickly without thinking. Now, generally, statements like women should have a choice are meaningless as they stand, like the statement, I have a right to take, and then you can fill in the blank. The claim requires an object. Choose what? Take what? No one has an open-ended right to choose. People only have the right to choose particular things. Whether anyone has a right to choose depends on what choice they have in mind. In this case, though, there was no ambiguity. The woman had already identified what the choice amounted to: killing babies, to use her words. So even though she personally respected all life, including human life, this was not a belief she was comfortable forcing on others. Women still should have the choice to kill their own babies. That was her view. She did not state her conviction in those words, of course, but that was clearly what she believed. So he took her at her word, and he says, when bizarre ideas like these are implied, do not let them lurk in the shadows. Drag them into the light with a request for clarification. Make the implicit idea explicitly obvious. And this is what I did next. So he said, "Do you mean women should have the choice to kill their own babies?" Well, she thought for a moment. "I think all things should be taken into consideration on this question." "Okay, tell me, what kind of considerations would make it all right to kill a baby?" "Incest," she answered. I was not surprised by her response, since the line is part of the pro-choice playbook. But I don't want you to miss something significant here. This dear young woman was advancing her view by trotting out standard slogans in favor of abortion. Women have a right to choose. All things should be taken into consideration. Incest justifies abortions. Yet in this case, her slogans did not defend abortion in the abstract, but explicitly promoted baby killing. The fact hadn't registered with her, though, because her slogans were getting in the way. She was simply reciting her lines without thinking. However, you can see from where I stood, the conversation was starting to sound a little weird. This happens all the time, of course, on both sides of the aisle. We trot out our pet slogans, whether secular ones or Christian ones, letting our catchphrases do the work that careful, thoughtful conversation should be doing instead. The habit often obscures the full significance or ramifications, in this case, of our words. I decided to take the conversation one step farther, hoping to break the slogan spell. Let me see if I understand your view," I said. "Let's just say I had a 2-year-old child standing next to me who had been conceived as a result of incest. On your view, it seems I should have the liberty to kill her. Is that right?" This last question stopped her in her tracks. Though the notion was clearly absurd, it was also clear that she was deeply committed to her pro-choice convictions. She had no snappy slogan to respond with and had to pause for a moment to think about the corner she had backed herself into. Finally, she said, "I'd have mixed feelings about that. It was the best she could do." Of course, she meant this as a concession, but it was a desperately weak response. Killing a 2-year-old? Gee, you got me on that one. I'll have to think about it. "I hope so," was all that I had the heart to say. At this point, I noticed a line of customers forming behind me. I realized our conversation was interfering with her work, and my brief opportunity had come to a close. True, I hadn't gotten to the gospel, but that was not the direction this conversation was going. This wasn't a gospel moment, but a gardening moment that involved a vital moral issue. It was time to abandon the pursuit, entrust her to the Lord, and move on. My wife and I finished our transaction, wished her well, and departed. So now there is a section on lessons learned. Let's think about this encounter a little bit more. First, there was no tension, no anxiety, no awkwardness in the exchange. There were no lines drawn in the sand and no one vigorously protecting their turf. There was no confrontation, no defensiveness, no discomfort. The discussion flowed easily and naturally. I was relaxed and so was she, and that's the way I like it. I don't want to get in a fight for good reason. If anyone gets mad, I lose. People are not inclined to change their minds when they're angry. Second, even with the relaxed atmosphere, I was in the driver's seat of the conversation the entire time. I was able to stay there calmly and thoughtfully by using three important tactics or maneuvers I will explain in greater detail later in the book, to probe the young woman's ideas and challenge her faulty thinking. To start with, I asked 7 specific questions. I used these questions to begin the conversation. As I go over them, you can remember where they were placed right at the beginning of the conversation. First, does that star have religious significance, or is it just jewelry? And to gain information from her, so you're Wiccan. I then used questions to expose what I thought were weaknesses in how she responded. Do you mean women should have the choice to kill their own babies? I also gently challenged the inconsistent and contradictory nature of her views. On one hand, she was a witch who respected all life. On the other hand, she was pro-choice on abortion, a procedure she candidly characterized as baby killing. Third, I tried to help her see the logical consequences of her convictions. For her, incest was a legitimate reason to kill a baby. But when asked if it was legitimate to kill a toddler for the same reason, she balked. She even thought, strictly speaking, this was fully consistent with her view. The last thing I want you to notice about our conversation is critical. The witch in Wisconsin was doing most of the work. The only effort on my part was to pay attention to her responses and steer the exchange in the direction I wanted it to go, which was not hard using my tactics. So since he was comfortable being a gardener in that interaction, doing a little spade work instead of pushing for a harvest before its season, he didn't feel any pressure to squeeze the gospel into the conversation in a way that was artificial, unnatural, and unhelpful. He made the best of the opportunity he had, knowing that for the moment she was his task, but ultimately she was God's responsibility, and he left her to the Lord and moved on. This is the power of the tactical approach, staying in the driver's seat in conversations so you can direct the discussion, exposing faulty thinking, and suggesting more fruitful alternatives along the way. Regardless of your capabilities, you can maneuver almost effortlessly in conversations just like I did if you learn the material that is going to be presented here. He has taught these concepts to tens of thousands of people just like us, and he's equipped them with confidence and ability to have meaningful, productive conversations about spiritual things. And nobody has to get weird, and nobody has to get mad. You can become an effective ambassador for Christ. It requires only that you pay attention to the guidelines in the chapters that follow and apply what you have learned. So if you'd like to go back and review the first case, the first conversation, feel free to do that. The next section is called 21st Century Ambassadors, which really is us. And we begin that section by realizing or acknowledging that representing Christ anytime requires 3 skills. First, Christ's ambassadors need the basic knowledge necessary for the task. So, what is required to be Christ's ambassadors? First, they must know the central message of God's kingdom and something about how to respond to the obstacles they'll encounter on their mission. Now, that's a lot to take in one sitting. They must know the central message of God's kingdom. That's one part. And something about how to respond to the obstacles they encounter along the way on their mission. It's not enough for followers of Jesus to have an accurately informed mind. Our knowledge must be tempered with the wisdom that makes our message clear and persuasive. This requires the tools of a diplomat, not the weapons of a warrior. Tactical skill rather than brute force. Finally, our character can make or break our mission. Knowledge and wisdom are packaged in a person. If that person does not embody the virtues of the sovereign she serves, she will undermine her message and handicap her efforts. These three skills, knowledge, an accurately informed mind, wisdom, an artful method, and character, an attractive manner, play a part in every effective encounter with a non-believer. So the second skill, tactical wisdom, is the main focus of this book. And our discussions will follow the outline of the book. We might have to take a little detour once in a while, but my goal is to stay faithful to the book and follow those guidelines. Keep in mind that strategy and tactics are different. Strategy involves the big picture, the large-scale operation, one's positioning prior to engagement. Here's how this concept applies to our situation as Christian ambassadors. As followers of Jesus, we have a tremendous strategic advantage. We are well positioned on the field because our worldview holds up well under serious scrutiny, especially considering alternatives. Our strategic advantage includes two areas. The first, called offensive apologetics, makes a positive case for Christianity by offering reasons that support our view, giving evidence for the existence of God or for the resurrection of Christ or for the inspiration of the Bible, for example. The second area, often called defensive apologetics, answers specific challenges meant to undermine or disprove Christianity, responding to attacks on the authority and historical reliability of the Bible, or tackling the problem of evil, or addressing the challenge of Darwinian macroevolution, to name a few. Notice that in the way I am using the term, the strategic element focuses on content. Virtually every book ever written on defending Christianity takes this approach. Faithful Christian authors have filled bookshelves with enough information to deal decisively with every imaginable challenge to classical Christianity. Still, many Christians have an inferiority complex. Why? It might be because they have never been exposed to such excellent information. As a result, they are lacking the first skill of a good ambassador, knowledge. But I think there's another reason. Something is still missing. A sharp lawyer needs more than facts to make his case in court. He needs to know how to use his knowledge well. In the same way, we need a plan to artfully manage the details of our dialogues with others. This is where the tactical game plan comes in. And this next section is called Tactics, the Missing Piece of the Puzzle. He begins by telling a story about World War II. The Allied forces had a strategic plan for gaining a foothold on the European continent. The Normandy invasion, code-named Operation Overlord, involved a simultaneous attack on 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword on June 6, 1944, also known as D-Day. No strategy, however brilliant, can win a war, though. The devil, as they say, is in the details. Individual soldiers must hit the beach and engage, deploying assets and destroying obstacles to gain an advantage, dodging bullets all the while. Though we were following a diplomatic model and not a military one, the military metaphor is still helpful to us to distinguish strategy from tactics. Tactics, literally the art of arranging, focus on the immediate situation at hand. They involve the orderly, hands-on choreography of the particulars. Often, a clever commander can gain an advantage over a superior strength or number through tactical maneuvering. I think you can see the parallel for you as a Christian. You may have personal experience with how the gospel can change someone's life, but how do you design specific responses for specific people so you can have an impact in specific situations? Tactics can help because they offer techniques of maneuvering in what otherwise might be difficult conversations. They guide you in arranging your resources in an artful way. They suggest approaches that anyone can use to be more persuasive, in part because they help you to be more reasonable and thoughtful instead of just emotional about your convictions as a follower of Christ. The tactical approach requires as much careful listening as thoughtful response. You have to pay attention so you can adapt to new information. This method resembles one-on-one basketball more than a game of chess. There are plans being laid out, but there is constant motion and adjustment. There are some odd names for these tactics that he's going to give us. Names like Columbo, suicide, taking the roof off, Rhodes Scholar, just the facts, ma'am, and steamroller. Some you as the diplomat, some you initiate, and others you use for self-protection. And he will give us some real-life examples of how these are used, and the tactical approach can address common objections, complaints, or even assertions raised against the convictions you and I hold as followers of Jesus. But there is a danger I want you to be aware of. So I need to pause and make an important clarification. Tactics are not manipulative tricks or slick ruses. They are not clever ploys to embarrass other people or to force them to submit to your point of view. They are not meant to belittle or humiliate others who disagree with you so you can gain notches in your spiritual belt. It's not the Christian life to wound, embarrass, or play one-upmanship with colleagues, friends, or even opponents, but it's a common vice. Anyone can easily fall into. So there are this warning for two reasons. First, these tactics that we are going to learn are powerful and can be abused. It's not difficult to make someone look silly when you master these techniques. A tactical approach can quickly show people how foolish some of their ideas are. Therefore, we have to be careful not to use these tactics simply to assault others in a vindictive or abusive way. And second, the illustrations in this book are abbreviated accounts of real conversations that Greg has had with non-believers. In the retelling of the accounts, he may appear more aggressive than he was in real life. I'm not opposed to being assertive, direct, or challenging. However, I never intend to be abrasive or abusive to gain an advantage by demeaning another person. It's not only bad manners, it's unnecessary when you have the truth and such good reasons to believe it. Greg's goal for us, rather, is to find clever ways to exploit someone's bad thinking for the purpose of guiding her to truth, remaining gracious and charitable at the same time. His aim is to manage, not manipulate, to convince, not coerce, to finesse, not fight. And he would like for us to adopt the same. So, just because we are a little nervous about speaking with others for the sake of Christ, he wants to assure us that he's been engaging challengers and critics in the marketplace of ideas for over 40 years. The people I talk with, he says, atheists, cultists, skeptics, and secularists of every description, all oppose evangelical Christian views, sometimes vigorously and belligerently. Often they are very smart people. And this concerned him at first. He wasn't sure how the responses he'd learned in the study would turn out against these smart guys in practice with thousands of people watching or listening. What Greg discovered in the crucible of those moments was that the facts and sound reason are on our side. Most people, even the smart ones, don't give much thought to their opposition to Christianity. And he knows this because he's listened to their objections. He has learned we don't have to be frightened of the facts or of the adversaries. So take your time, do your homework, think through the issues. If Christianity is the truth, then no matter how convincing the other side sounds at first, there will always be a fly in the ointment somewhere, a mistake in thinking, a wayward fact, an unjustified conclusion. Keep looking for it. Sooner or later, it will show up. Many times, as we will see, the right tactic will help you discover that flaw and show it for the error that it is. And now a second word of encouragement from Greg. You can do this. He is going to show us how. He will guide us step by step. We're going to go through his game plan that will help us be comfortable in maneuvering and gracious in our conversations about our Christian convictions and values. We are to move at our own pace, engage at our own comfort level, and then we'll discover that the tactical approach provides us with a large margin of safety. There is an art to this process, and learning any craft takes time and a little focused effort. It takes practice to turn a volatile situation into an opportunity. If you learn the tactics that we'll be presenting here, he makes that promise that we will get better at presenting the truth clearly and sometimes even cleverly. So, use this time to develop the art of staying in the driver's seat and steering the conversation during our discussions with others. We will learn how to navigate through the minefields to gain a footing or an advantage in conversations. We will be learning to be a better diplomat, an ambassador for Jesus Christ. And that is exactly where we want to be. Now, there is a summary here, and I've got about 5 more minutes to share it with you. The first thing we learned was the value of using a tactical approach when discussing Christianity. Tactics can help us manage the conversation by getting into the driver's seat and staying there. Tactics also help us maneuver effectively in the midst of disagreement so that our engagements seem more like diplomacy than D-Day. Second, we defined tactics and distinguished them from strategy. Can you remember? Strategy involves the big picture, which in our case means the content, information, and reasons why someone should believe Christianity is true. Tactics, on the other hand, involve the details of the engagement, the art of navigating through the conversation itself. And third, we learn about the dangers of using tactics. They are not manipulative tricks or slick ruses or clever ploys to belittle or humiliate another person. Instead, tactics are used. They are things that we use to gain a footing, to maneuver, and to expose the person's bad thinking so that we can guide him into truth. Before we get into the details, there are a couple of reservations that you may have, and I'm going to save those reservations for our next time together. Thank you again for joining in. I trust that we will meet again soon personally, person to person, and I thank you. I pray the Lord would bless you and keep you and make you aware of the ways in which you could use tactics to keep a conversation going, to feel more in charge of that conversation. I ask the Lord's blessing on your life, and I look forward to meeting you next time right here. Thank you for joining me. Good night.